Hey, what's up everybody? It's Lids, and today we are back for some more Gwent, the Witcher-themed card game, and we are in for another tournament with friends. So if you didn't catch the last one, make sure that you take a look at that, because today will be a bit of a rematch here, featuring the same people who played in the last one. That, of course, includes Doland, who won the last one, Peach, Jer, and myself. So last time I didn't win, so that meant that, well, they decided that my punishment for not winning was that I was supposed to sing Stayin' Alive by the Bee Gees in Discord, so that was an experience. However, now that Doland is the defending champion, he is on the hot seat, so if we can dethrone him, then that means that he is up for a round of singing himself. If he does manage to maintain his title, then that means that he gets to pick a emoji in Discord. So, we'll see how that all plays out. First, however, we are going to play with Jer, because that is the person who I did not play in the previous tournament. So we're going to have Jer play against me, Dolan will go against Peach. Those are the two people who didn't play at all against each other in the first round, and then, as with last time, the winners of the first round will play each other in the bit of a champions match, and the losers of the first round will play each other for a consolation match. So with that being said, let's issue the challenge to Jer. Okay, so Jer has accepted the challenge. And last time I used, I think, almost exclusively, if not exclusively, Northern Realms. This time I'm thinking I'm going to go with Skellige. Those are the two factions that I'm most familiar with. And we'll see how this goes. Last time, of course, didn't go so well, at least in the championship match, because, well, I had a misplay or two using some new cards. I did make some modifications to my Skellige deck, so we'll see how this plays out. I'm not sure what to expect from Jer, because I've never played him before. He's the only person who I have not played of this group of people.
Got the heart.
I heard a rumor that he was going to go with monsters, so I suppose this shouldn't be too much of a surprise. Let's see what we have here. So, I have Sucrus and Uncrate Greatsword. Those are two cards that I like to have in tandem with each other. This guy gets boosted whenever we deal damage in the corresponding opponent's row. So we want to have some sources of damage, in which case, Lacerate, Camelford's Tremors looks good. We might not need quite this many other cards, though. Let's try getting another source of damage. That's a great one right there. So, let's go with this. We are going first here. So, I was tempted to get rid of one of the Great Swords. Again, gets boosted whenever one of Jer's units in the opposing row takes damage. So in this case, we put our guy in the melee row. That means that if Jer puts someone in the melee row for his own team, and that unit takes damage, then this guy gets boosted by 1 every time that happens. This deals 1 damage 6 times, which means that if Jer does put someone over there, and we can damage it 6 times, then this guy will get boosted by 6. Lacerate also deals some damage, similar with Stammelford's Tremors, so that's why I like that combo, and he does play a card there. So that makes me happy to see. I like using Sucrus to tag alongside because it prevents one of the cards we like from taking damage, so it's a way of protecting this guy if we are feeling as if he's at risk of getting targeted from some sort of attacks from Jer. That being said, looks like we are in good shape here because, well, he did play a card in the row where we wanted him to play a card. A lot of the damage sources that we have at the moment, though, are things that will attack multiple enemies at once. So I think we want to wait a little bit and try to, well, double up. So let's play Sucrus this turn. And this will make his Ancient Foglet come back in the same, I think in the same row. With a boost and with Doomed, which means that it won't come back next time. So it's a little bit nifty. It means that normally you would not want to damage that card. However, on this occasion, we want to deal as much damage as we can in this melee row. So if JR continues to play cards here, then we are very happy. And if he puts that in the melee row, as he did just there, this is the perfect setup for us, because with all these units with just 1 HP, if we use something like Stammelford's Tremors, which deals 1 damage to all enemy units, that means we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units taking damage. On Greatsword will get boosted by 5, and suddenly we have a very powerful card on our hands. Does mean that if Jer is holding on to a Geralt of Rivia card. Not this Geralt, a slightly different version. It is the card that can outright destroy a unit with 9 or more power. If we were to do that ability that I was saying we might just do, then this guy would reach 10, and therefore it would be possible for Jer to remove him that way. Unfortunately, that is a quote-unquote destroy effect, not a damage effect. So that does mean that Sucrus would not be able to prevent that from happening. However, I'm not totally against it if Jer wants to do that, because I think it's early enough that we could still recover. So I think we do it, and we challenge Jer. See if he is willing to make that investment. Use what is probably his best counter card in that Geralt card, if he has it in his hand at all. And if he does destroy it, then I think we can play another on-crate Greatsword. He does not opt to do that. Instead, he uses the Intriga Warrior, which will consume, which means destroy any adjacent units and absorb their power. It gives him one powerful card. It is still in the melee row, which is fantastic, because that does mean we can use our hero ability, which is dealing 1 damage. So that's simple. One could argue it might even be worth deliberately passing here and having Jer either try to win this round by playing extra cards and allowing us to get card advantage. I think that's a little bit preemptive, though. So the other thing that I do love about having Sucrus here is this card normally would damage our unit by 3 and then boost it by 9. However, because this guy won't take damage next to Sucrus, not so much. Not so much. And we could boost further using this card. I'm actually going to boost Sucrus, though, instead, just in case he does have that Geralt card. That way, there is still a way for us to have a relatively strong character, even if he gets rid of this guy. We'd still be in the lead in that case. So we'll see how Jer reacts to this. Technically, Geralt Yrden would be better in this instance. However, Geralt Yrden is a card that you need to open up from packs. You don't automatically start with it, whereas that is the case. You do automatically start with Geralt of Rivia. So I know that he has the card that can outright remove or destroy either of these two guys. I don't think he has this card that would allow him to reset them, which would mean on-crate Greatsword would go back down to a 4. Sucrus would go back down to a 6. He can lock it, though, which means that this guy will no longer have his ability to get stronger every time someone takes damage in this row. So we, for example, would not want to use Giga Scorpion Decoction in that case. Probably same thing with Lacerate. We might be okay here, though, because this is a pretty humongous lead at this point. I mean, yes, if he were to use Geralt of Rivia, then suddenly he could make a pretty quick comeback. In fact, that might be a one-card way of overcoming that deficit. So, if he does have that card, that would be a great counter to this, but I think we challenge him to do that. If he doesn't, then he's going to have to play numerous cards to make up for this deficit. And if he's willing to do that, then we'll take it, because that means that for subsequent rounds, we'll have a significant card advantage, which should allow us to more easily take the victory in rounds 2 and 3, and, well, that momentum will lead us to an overall victory, because remember, we have to win 2 out of 3 of the rounds, so this is just round 1 here. We have a strong lead, but because we passed, that means that we will not take any more turns. And so it's up to Jer to decide as to whether he's willing to accept the round 1 loss and pass as well, hold on to his 6 cards here, or is he willing to invest further? He is not. Okay, I think that is the right play for him. It does mean that, of course, we need to continue to play well in rounds 2 and 3. We do not have a card advantage. Let's see what we get here. And we have a few sources of damage. On-crate Longship will deal damage every time Jer plays a card. I think that's a strong first 1 or 2 turn card to play. Similarly with our pirate friend over here, who applies bleed and gets his cooldown reduced every time we play a warship. So ideally we would go this guy, then this guy, and collectively these two give us a source of damage along with this and this that can set up on-crate Greatsword. So I think we like what we're seeing here. And therefore, I will play this guy first. Does need to go in the melee row. Theoretically, he has Zeal, which means we could use his bleed ability right away. Normally, you would have to wait a turn to activate something like that. However, Jer doesn't have any units out there at the moment, so we can't apply the bleed to anyone. So I suppose, theoretically, that means we could have gone for either this guy first or this guy next, but actually, to tell you the truth, what we should do is bleed here. Damage there, I suppose. And then this, you'll see, will reduce the cooldown, so next turn we will be able to use that ability right away. And that is the end of our turn. So, other cards we have on hand. This is one of our other strong cards here that allows us to summon a unit from our graveyard and bring it back onto the playing field. Now, Skelga has a few cards like that. There is the Freya's Blessing card that is a starter card that you would normally get, whereas this one is one that we open from a pack. This one is similar, also allows you to play a unit from your graveyard. However, it needs to be a bronze card, meaning it can't be high rarity, and it also gives it doomed, meaning if you play it that way, you won't be able to do that again in the future. Let's double check as to what Jared just did, because I was not paying close attention as we were looking at our cards. He damaged a unit by 3 and boosted an ally by 3. So it looks like he took out our pirate friend and boosted his Necker. And so that does mean that he is catching up a little bit here. That Necker does still have 1 bleed on it, so we'll get a little bit lower next turn. I think that is still reason enough for us to play our Greatsword here. Now, we would like for Jer to continue to play more cards in the melee row here, to give us more fodder to power up the Greatsword. However, if he were to play things in the ranged row, then we're in a little bit of trouble. Let's see what he does here. Let's play it in the melee row, and there you see Uncrate Longship does deal 1 damage whenever he plays a unit. We dealt 1 damage, and that boosted us 1 on the Greatsword, and Necker just took damage from the bleed, which also boosted the Greatsword. So, good pairing there, and I'll tell you what. I'm liking the look of playing Giga Scorpion Decoction on the Noon Wraith. It's slightly overkill damage, because this can deal 6 damage, whereas, obviously, the Noon Wraith has 5 life at the moment, 5 power. So, however, that does mean that we will still boost on Greatsword by 5, and Noon Wraith will play 2 rats in a random... Oh, actually, in our own row when we do that. Okay, I think that's fine. And then we'll use our leader ability on the Necker. Deal a little bit more damage and further boost our Greatsword. Now, again, we have crossed the 9 power threshold, which does mean that if Jared does have Geralt of Rivia on hand, then he could outright remove this card. Technically speaking, we do have a way to bring it back, even if he does do that. That is a good card there. Because remember, we do have the ability to bring cards back using either Freya's Blessing or Sigrifa's Right. We played Osrel, which consumes a card from either his graveyard or our graveyard. Looks like he played in the melee row, which means he chose our graveyard. So that means we were not able to draw from that graveyard. I think he actually chose the Uncrate Greatsword, so that means the one that we used in the previous round we can no longer revive. It is gone. However, we do still have Sucrus here, and that's a bit intriguing. It is a strong card, and it's something that we probably don't want him to consume. So, for that reason, I think we do play this here and protect Uncrate Greatsword, at least to a certain extent. Like I was saying earlier, unfortunately, if he does have Geralt of Rivia, he can still outright remove this card. Sucrus's ability to prevent the unit to the left of him from taking damage does not count for Destroy. But if Jared continues to play cards in the melee row, and that does help us out to continue to boost this guy. Granted, he plays this other unit that consumes things in the range row, so that probably means we have a limited amount of time before these guys are going to get consumed, and this guy will absorb their power. So let's make sure we deal damage with Lacerate this time round. and boost on Greatsword here. And similarly, we probably want to use our hero ability there. So we are, although we have a relatively large lead at the moment, it is risky. It's riskier than it looks, because if Jer takes out this guy in one hit, which he could theoretically do with that Geralt card, then suddenly things are a lot more balanced than they were previously. So, see if he opts to do that. He may have it in his hand, he may deliberately be waiting to play it until the last turn. That is often something that people will do to be particularly devious, and, you know, we might further invest in this guy, only to have the chair brought out from under us. So hopefully that does not happen. I'm looking at who we might be able to revive with Freya's Blessing here. And the answer is potentially the Pirate, but that's it. All these other cards here are special cards. They're not units, so we can't bring them back from the dead because they were never really living to begin with. So I think what we might want to do is actually deliberately play this guy, who is a high power unit, 7. And he makes us discard a card. That was actually a pretty strong one that we did just discard. My hope was that maybe we would discard a unit, and then that would actually make it easier for us to choose a nice card using Freya's Blessing. But having a 7 on the field, I think, is very helpful in case he does opt to use the Geralt card, and that is likely his highest base power unit. Started with 9. It did, of course, take 1 damage from the on-crate longship when he played it. And he has not yet consumed anything with this guy. So that does mean we have a little bit more time in which to damage in the melee row using our leader skill. And boosting on Greatsword in the process. And I think I'm going to save Geralt Jordan for last. So remember, this will reset units, meaning it returns them to their base power. At the moment, we would want to play that here. It would reduce the Necker from 4 strength to 1 and have no effect on the Kikimora Warrior. It would actually boost him if we were to use it on this row, because these guys are lower than their base power. Let's play this here. Need you to be in the melee row. And we will deal damage in this row for that very reason, I think. However, if Jer opts to do the consume ability with this guy, then that does mean it will become boosted, and then suddenly, then the range row might be a little more attractive. So we'll have to pay close attention to where those boosts end up being, and he is starting to boost the range row. So suddenly it's looking like range might be the better row to reset, but let's see if he uses the consume ability here, or if he continues to play a couple more cards here. Presumably he will. Oh, he's consuming. Okay, he might play it right here and consume those 2 that he just boosted. He does opt to do that. So now this is the strength of this card. So it only has 2 power itself, which is very little. However, this Indriga Warrior starts off as a 4. Since it consumed a couple of very powerful units and absorbed their power, it went all the way up to a 22. However, we can bring it back down to that 4 value by playing Geralt Jordan and affecting this row here. So that is the way we counter that. And we'll see if Jer has any counters himself with this last card. The most dangerous thing, I've said it many times, but would be Geralt of Rivia. Even if he has it at this stage, I do think we still have this one. It is not Geralt. It is another consume card. That's definitely been the theme of his deck, but there we go. Victory in round 1 against Jer. Well played, Jer. But onward we go. Here we see the results from the Dolan versus Peach match, in which, wow, that was extremely close. Dolan just barely beat Peach in round 1, and similar story in round 2. So it does look like we'll have a bit of a rematch here for the championship match. Dolan against me, and Peach will go against Jer for the consolation match. So against Dolan, I think we will continue to use the Skellige deck. I did not take note, actually. I ought to have looked at which deck he was using against Peach there. I suspect that he will likely be using his Skellige deck again, in which case, let's see if we can one-up him here for a rematch of the championship game, in which, well, we got a bone to pick. Goes for monsters, actually. Okay. So we'll see how this plays out then. It'll be a bit of a different feel than the previous go-round. When we were doing Northern Realms, he was doing Skellige. So, I do like starting with 2 on-crate longships for some damage, and on-crate greatsword does fare well with that. Armored Drakkar, I'm mixed as to my feelings about that. I feel like in some instances I've seen it be amazing, in other instances I feel like it has not been terribly effective. So I'm gonna deliberately re-roll that, give ourselves a little more damage, and between these two, we do have, and I suppose these as well, we do have some of that. Let's try getting greedy here. Yeah, Geralt Jordan might be helpful. Less direct offense, but gives us a bit of a counter in case Dylan gets a little out of hand with boosting some of his units. We do go first here. I think that's a good thing. We want to get these on-crate longships down here as soon as possible. We'll refrain from boosting them, at least initially, because that would boost by 5 and therefore bring this to that 9 threshold. He does opt to lock it. Okay. So, yes, unfortunate. That means that this guy obviously took some damage, so it went from a 4 down to a 2, but more importantly, he locked it, meaning that he can't use its ability to deal 1 damage every time he plays a card. However, we have 2 of these guys. My hope is that he cannot lock the second one. Even if he can, I still think that we're in decent shape here, because when he chose to lock it, that meant that he did not play any cards himself, so he added 0 strength to his side, whereas we still have 2 from our first card, so I'm okay with that. I'm hoping that this guy remains untouched, though, and we could also use Freya's Blessing if he does actually take this card out, or at the very least, in rounds 2 or 3, we could bring it back from our graveyard with this card, and at that point in time, it would no longer be locked. This card will deal 2 damage, and take this out. Actually, if anything, we wanted him to do that, because now we can use Freya's Blessing immediately, and I think we might want to do that, because the earlier, like I said, that we can get these guys out, the better. And we could deliberately attack Archspore with our hero ability here, deal 1 damage. It does have a Death Wish ability, though, which means that when it gets defeated, it does, well, a repeat of its deploy ability, meaning it will deal 2 damage again. Not the end of the world. I suppose we can do it. We'll take a little bit of damage for it. But these guys have armor. So it's still hanging on. And if we needed to, if we felt terribly concerned that this guy might get taken out for good, then we could opt to boost it as well, and that would bring it up to an 8 this time. Granted, Dolan is getting rid of the other one, so he's being very aggressive with the spells. Like I said, I think that's fine as long as we make sure that we hang on to the cards we have here. In this case, I think definitely worthwhile for us to boost that guy. And similarly, let's play Sucrus, because this would have prevented one of these guys from getting hit by that spell earlier. Now means that he can't use a Thunderbolt against this longship anymore. Or at least he can try. He could actually do it. It would just deal 0 damage and be a waste of a card. So if anything, it'd be great if he did opt to do that. But we'll settle for this. That is likely one of his stronger cards. We saw that Dare, who was also using the monster deck earlier, had a card that had 9 base power, and Dylan should have that one as well, because it is one that you start with. So that's not out of the question. We could further protect these guys by using the Defender card we have here, which means that the opponent, Dolan, would not be able to target anyone other than this guy if we put it in this correct row here. Granted, we misplayed a Defender card several occasions previous tournament, and that may or may not have been the way that we lost. Part of me wants to hold on to this and see if we can make that the deciding factor later on. So let's use on-crate Greatsword. And we'll deal a little bit of damage in the melee row. Boost him up a little bit. And that puts us in a pretty decent place here. Like I was saying earlier, Dolan was focusing a lot on dealing damage to us, but we were able to hang on. Yeah. And that meant that we were able to hold on to a bit of a power advantage. And ultimately, we rode that advantage off into the sunset, at least for round 1. As for round 2, have to do a card check here. I might have had to play one more card than Dolan. I did. So he has 9 out of 10 right now. We have 8. We've got a little bit of a disadvantage here. I don't think that's enough of a disadvantage for us to be terribly concerned. Theoretically, if we were, we could deliberately pass almost immediately and make it so that we draw up to the maximum number of cards. Dolan does as well. We're playing 10 against 10, and then it's even Stevens for round 3. However, that was also something that caused some issues in the previous champion match, so I think we want to not tempt fate there. As for our cards this time round, Sucrus would be great with this guy. Do have a lot of sources of damage. Not sure I love you. Yeah. So we got lots of sources of damage here. Damage, 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 potentially damage, but more likely a boost. The problem is it requires that we keep this guy safe, because this is going to be the guy that gets boosted from all that. We don't have a lot of units. We have only the on-crate Greatsword, who is the one that will benefit most from the other cards that we picked, and the Defender. So the Defender is going to be key here. I think we're going to end up playing that first, and then we'll probably save Geralt Jurden near the end, see if Dolan has anyone that he is opting to boost a lot. Problem here is that we have to guess as to which row Dolan is going to play his cards in, because, remember, on-crate Greatsword only gets that boost when you damage cards in the corresponding opponent row. So if we play in the melee row, gets boosted when Dolan takes damage in the melee row. Played in the range row, only gets boosted when we damage enemies in the range row. Fortunately, at least here, we did play one card in the melee row, so that does give us a little bit of fodder for doing this. As for whether he continues to do that or not, remains to be seen. So we'll damage with our hero ability, because we could have opted, if we saw Dolan start to play things in the range row, to play on-crate Greatsword in the range row. It just means that the Defender ability would be doing functionally nothing for us. So let's see what he does here. He does, unfortunately, start to play things in the range row. So maybe he'll forget about it? Probably not, but let's see. In that case, that means we could continue to pepper away at this guy. Our hero ability might be the easiest way to do that. It'll be a little bit slow, because we only can use it every other turn. But in the meantime, not going to want to lock or reset anything yet. Actually, this is not a great card to have along with Geralt Jurden, because they do very similar things, and potentially one of them might make the other not very valuable. And like I was saying, we ideally want to save up some of this damage. Part of me wants to boost this guy, but I am wary of him having Geralt of Rivia this time round, as I was with Jer, because I think with so few units on our side, we are at significant risk if he does manage to outright remove one of them. We don't have any of those cards that allow us to respawn anyone at this stage. We need to be very mindful of keeping these guys on the playing field. So, and these guys that he played earlier, he's played a couple of them, boost all Death Wish units in his hand by 1, so that's why you see his Harpy Egg would have normally been 3, however it's all the way up to a 5, because it is a unit with Death Wish. So, in that case, we can continue to damage this guy, and that will boost on-crate Greatsword. In fact, I am grateful that Dolan did opt to put the Harpy Egg in here. And I wonder, probably, an opportunity to use another Sammelford's Tremors. We'll take this guy out. It will damage this guy, but not finish him off. And it will not finish off the Harpy Egg, which is actually significant, because we want to damage it, but not destroy it, is the ideal way of getting the boost without worrying about, actually triggering that Death Wish ability. Now, I deliberately attacked the enemy that was not in the melee row there, which meant that I did not boost on-crate Greatsword. However, the reason I did that was because he's at 8 right now, which is as high as he can go without being at risk of Geralt of Rivia taking him out. So, we would like to keep him here until we are certain that either Dolan doesn't have that card in his hand, in which case we know we're safe, or he plays it, and there's no one that he can destroy with it, so it becomes functionally a wasted card. So that does, however, mean that we are a little bit, little bit handicapped here in that we can't use this card, at least not in this row, because that would boost us. Can't use this card on this guy, at least, because, well, certainly bring him above 9. Could play Geralt of Rivia, but this seems very preemptive for that. I think we do it anyway. I think we deal the damage. It does bring us above 9. And if he has Geralt, then we're basically forcing his hand. We're saying, hey, if you have him, you gotta play him. And hopefully that means that gives us some peace of mind in round 3. Did not play it, at least not immediately. There's a chance that was deliberate. He may still have it, and he's trying to encourage us to further boost this guy, only to, again, sort of take the chair out from under us and surprise us last minute and turn what looked like a comfortable victory into a not so much of a victory. Granted, we're behind right now, but, well, until proven otherwise, I think we need to act on the assumption that he does not have Geralt, and then, because we have a round to spare on him, that does mean that even if he outright removes this guy and we're in trouble, then we can potentially make up for it in the next round in a winner-takes-all. So, for that reason, yeah, we'll boost him further. Certainly at this stage, if he has Geralt, I think he would play it now. I think the 17 certainly would attract his attention. He has not yet. And you know, the boosting that he did for all of the Wish cards, well, it's adding up. He does still have a lead here. He can lock and reset a unit, which would bring this guy down to 6, or this guy down to 4, or this guy down to 5. We have another way of resetting units over here. Collectively, across the two of those things, that still isn't very close. Hold on, let's do some maths here. So he has a 6 power lead at the moment, and with these guys, that's 2 we can gain by reducing this, or 2 he can lose. Another 2, so 6 total. And then Geralt is adding 2 power to our side. So at most, we're gaining 2, and he's losing 6. He has 3 cards to make up for that. Basically, I think that means in 3 cards, he needs to get at least 2 strength. Pretty sure he can do that. So I think we deliberately pass here and take the L. Hold on to our cards. Don't overinvest. Granted, you could have made the case that maybe cards we would have played would have been worse than the cards he would have played. We could have deliberately made it so that he had to use some of his really good cards. This is the card that I keep on talking about. You definitely want to have it here. Having both Geralts is a little bit risky, though. As I was saying earlier, these two are very similar in how they work, and one of them does kind of take away from the other, so I think we deliberately get rid of this guy. I like this as a late round card because it is very high strength. Doesn't require that you set him up much. Just play him, high strength immediately. Bringing a character back from the discard pile also sounds good. I don't think this card is going to be very good in this round because it's not going to be long enough to apply too many of those leads. As for redrawing this card instead, I'm not necessarily sure that's what we would have wanted. But this is a card I keep on talking about. Destroy an enemy unit with 9 or more power. So if we find that Dolan plays a very high power unit, we can outright remove it with Geralt of Rivia. And this might be that card. We saw Jer use it in the previous game. Allows him to consume a unit from a graveyard, meaning basically absorb its power. Brings him up to 8, which is just shy of what we can do with Geralt, so unfortunately that doesn't work there. We could lock and reset, however, I think in either case, this is preemptive. Because like we were saying earlier, we don't necessarily know. Might he try to boost this further? In which case, great, we'll just get rid of it in that case. So I think, with that in mind, let's take a look at who we might want to bring back from our graveyard. Now, this card cannot resurrect gold units, so Sucrus is not an option. That means either Uncrate Longship or an Uncrate Greatsword. Do we have enough damage to set up Uncrate Greatsword? I don't think so. But I think that means that instead, We go for the long shift. And we deal some damage here. I suppose we could have still dealt some damage with our hero ability, so debatable. This is another card that is best for long rounds in which you expect your opponent to play a lot of cards. That is not something we wanted to see him do. That is unfortunate that he outright took it out there. I'm leaning this way. Could go either with either of these guys, I think. We potentially should have played this guy first, again, to force the discard. Let's see what happens here. That was a really good card that we discarded. Not that we were going to end up drawing it, but it adds it to our discard pile. It is not, however, a bronze unit. It has the gold trim, and it is not a Skellige unit, so that means that we would not have been able to resurrect it for a couple of reasons. So, on the whole, it means that it didn't really do anything. That we discarded that card, but it theoretically might have made a difference for us to do this first. So we should have done that and then tried to resurrect just in case. Didn't matter this time, but... Okay. As for what we do next, at the end of your turn, if this card has no armor, then it gains the armor back. If it doesn't have armor, then it gets boosted. Theoretically, we probably should have played this relatively early as well. I'm deliberately going to damage the unit that is not higher. This one is relatively close to reaching 9 power, and we want to encourage Dolan to reach that threshold so that we can take him out with Geralt. Does not happen. Another 7 card. So that's unfortunate. So in that case, what we do here is we don't go with Geralt because there's no 9 strength card, and therefore he will not have any special effect. However, we can use Artifact Compression, which will lock and reset, meaning this guy will go from a 7 down to a 1. So it's almost like we're taking him out. It's a good plan B. It does tie us up here. Now, Dolan has 2 cards, we only have 1. And that does mean that it's not looking good here. In all likelihood, well, we really want him to play a 9 strength card right here, or play a card that ultimately, well, I would say, play a card that he would then set up in the subsequent turn to be 9 strength or higher. However, we're going to play Geralt next turn no matter what, so it needs to be 9 strength right now. He does, theoretically, have 1 such card. He might be debating right now as to whether he ought to play it. He did not, so we're in trouble. That means that unless Dolan does something very silly, then he has 1. Because what we can do here is, sure, we can take care of this guy. That's not going to make a huge difference, though. When we play Geralt, it does give us 3 additional power, which is a little bit, but he doesn't have a 9 strength card to destroy, which is the primary reason why you want him. So assuming that Dolan has a card with at least 1 strength, or a little bit higher, otherwise it would be a draw, he is going to take this one. He also has his hero ability, which will guarantee that he can win this one. So unless he opts to destroy his own unit somehow, he did have Geralt. Okay. He's in a similar situation where he does not have a card to destroy, but he does take the victory there, so Dolan repeats as champion. Well played, Dolan. And like I was saying before, that means that this time round, since he defended his crown successfully, that means that he will be able to use a specific emoji of his choice in Discord, and he does not need to sing. So unfortunately, we don't get to exact revenge just yet, but Dolan, watch out. We're coming for you next time. Thank you all for watching, hope you enjoyed, and if you're interested in checking out Gwent for yourself, you can check the link in the description. It'll allow you to join the game with a little bit of extra loot as well. So, with that being said, I'll see you next time.